Hi, and welcome to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. I'm Dupe Witherick, alcohol free wellbeing and transformational coach, and the best selling author of A Cocktail of Clarity, How to Ditch Drinking, Embody a Joyful New Identity, and Thrive Alcohol Free. This podcast will show you that being alcohol-free is not what the traditional narrative says. And even though alcohol is so ingrained in our society that it is okay to give yourself permission to stop drinking if you want to. And you do not have to wait until you hit rock bottom. It is certainly not boring, and I believe ditching drinking is just the start to living an extraordinary life. By getting rid of this one thing, it allows the doors to open to endless possibilities and opportunities. Each week, we will have guests on who are at various stages of the alcohol-free journey, from those who are curious to those who have been alcohol-free for years. We will also have experts on talking about different topics relating to alcohol and beyond. Through these conversations, you will discover what it means to thrive alcohol-free. Enjoy. So welcome, Cappy. Thank you so much for being on the show. I know you go by the name Cappy, and you can talk about that in a bit. But Brian is your name, but I know we call you Cappy. So I'm going to go with Cappy. Thanks for being on the show. Welcome to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. Love that you're here and that we connected. And maybe as a start, for people that might not know you, why don't you do a brief introduction and then we can go from there?
Absolutely. So yeah, it's Brian Capello. So my nickname is Cappy. And as I say, I'm 50% Italian. That name actually, one P, I'm Capello with two P's. One P means hair and two P's means hat. So I'm 50% Italian and 99% Irish. So I should actually go by Sully, and my mother is a Sullivan, and my uncles are all Sullys. So I should go by Sully, but that's why it's Cappy. And it was my drinking persona. When I first joined the sober community, there was another Brian already in there, well known. So I said, I'm going to go with Cappy, and it's now become my sober persona. So I love it. I've taken it back.
Okay, so obviously you've introduced yourself, but what brings you to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast?
All right, I'm going to try to tell this as quickly as possible, jump in as needed. But so I grew up, again, I've learned a sister, and growing up, my parents would offer us, sips of when we were teenagers, of their drinks. My father, whiskey sour, I'll never forget. And my brother and sister loved to sip them, and I hated it. And I was a runner. I was a pretty good runner. And so I didn't drink. I even knew back then, and I'm 53 and 7/8. But I knew back then alcohol was poison. I never said it, but I just had to have known that I could never drink as a runner. So then I went to college. I ran there the first semester, but we were running 12 miles a day, and I had no life. And I said, I've either got to drink or I've either got to keep running or have a life. And so it was then that I took my first drink. So I'll never forget when I walked into my dorm room freshman year with my parents, there was already a group. My room was the chosen one. That I had two roommates, but there were about 6 people in there swilling beers, smelled like a brewery. I'd never even discussed alcohol with my parents. My father, on the Italian side, can take it or leave it. My mother, full-blown alcoholism on both her parents. Her mother was a Sullivan, married a Sullivan, so as Irish as you could get. All her siblings, everybody drank pretty much every day of their lives. So, and I take 99% after my mother. Ironically, my siblings take 99% after my father. So luckily for me, that's how I always knew. I know it's not always, but for me, definitely genetic, because they can take it or leave it, just like my father. My siblings and my father, take it or leave it. My sister got really drunk in college once, hasn't barely ever drank since. She'll have like a mudslide every now and then. And my brother didn't drink till he was in his 30s. He has a full bar. He's been a bartender. Anyway, I still can't believe I was that strong of a kid back then that I didn't even cave on day one. I handled the awkwardness. It was crazy. And I made it 3 months. First time I ever drank, we went out to a club. The next day I said to these girls, I said, "Oh my God, it was so fun last night. I was talking to anybody." And they said, "Have you ever drank before?" And I said, "Oh yeah, absolutely." But I should have, the truth would have been a much better story that I never had. But I heard a guy once say, he said, I discovered then, and I've never felt so much like I fit on the planet, and that's a very strong reinforcer. And because I was a misfit, absolutely. I'd say I had an A personality, but B level confidence. I just didn't have physical confidence. I was a late bloomer. I barely dated. I basically dated one girl in high school, barely in college as well. And so I feel like I was always between kind of the A and the B crowd, the A, the jocks, and the B, just the regular people, and the C. I hate the word nerd, but that was kind of a nerd crowd. And so I was always I just never fit in, even with my own family, absolute black sheep. And so that's it. I discovered the magic of using it as a tool, and I use it as a social tool for the next 25, 30 years or whatever. And worked me less and less over the years. So I graduated college in 93, but I remember, so in 2007, so do the math on that, 14 years into it, went to give my grandmother's eulogy, and I got hauled off the altar after a couple sentences because I'd been doing shots in the parking lot. I actually thought just in the parking lot. My aunt told me recently at my parents' house, prior to going to the church, she said she could smell it on me. So anyway, I got hauled out, and I actually remember that. It's funny what you still remember. And I do remember being up on the altar. The next thing I remember is waking up in the passenger seat of my car at the after gathering in a restaurant parking lot. My cousin Jackie, thank you, drove my car there. And I woke up. I still don't remember to this day if I had the guts to then walk in or if I just waited for everyone else to come out. My guess is I waited for them to come out. If at all, she might have, well, yeah, she probably took my keys. So anyway, that was in 2007. I lived in Boston for the majority of my life. I was divorced. I was married to my first long-term girlfriend long time ago, divorced, no kids. I moved into Boston, the heart of Boston, the Back Bay, they call it, near the Prudential Center, if anyone been there. And so I could walk and drive everywhere. So once I got divorced, I got into dating. I was early on Match.com. And I found even as a guy, dating was kind of miserable. I know women really hate it. It's much easier for men, but I'd still go on bad dates. I wouldn't qualify them enough, and they'd be horrible. And then I always felt like I was the entertainer with the Irish blood. I'll never forget my therapist saying, "Brian, you don't always have to entertain." But couldn't get out of my system. My mother, that's the way she made conversation, was to just talk and talk and talk. In fact, I'll never forget, a girl so nicely said to me once in college, she said, "All the other girls talk that you call them back then, their landlines in their dorm rooms, and keep them on the phone." I would call with like a list. And I thought the longer you kept them on the phone, the better the conversation was. So that's all I knew. So these dates, I had all these pressure. So I'd start doing shots in the shower. I didn't even like dealing with my hair. I just got a haircut, got my hat on. I'm still crazy with my hair. It was like an afro. I wouldn't even let them cut it over my ears because I thought I had big ears. So I kept, bottom line, I pre-drank for everything. The rare times I wouldn't pre-drink, I'd have the best nights of my life and say, I'm never going to pre-drink again. But that never lasted. And my rock bottom was really in 2014. I took my niece to a One Direction concert. She was probably 11 then. I liked One Direction as well. They've got some great songs. And my brother-in-law dropped her off at my place in Boston. We had to drive about an hour to the burbs with traffic. So we went really early. Of course, you never intend to drink. I had no intentions when I signed up to do it, but I knew they'd be surrounded by screaming girls. I brought what I thought was just this little bottle of vodka, like a small Poland Springs bottle. I later found out it was bigger than I thought. It was actually from Porter Airlines, which is a Canadian airline. It sounds silly, but it was much wider than it looked. It was short, but wide. And then it'll come up in a minute. So we got there early. We went to a bowling alley. I drank a couple beers, unintended. And then when we got in the show, I just sipped on that vodka. And what I thought was maybe 6 ounces, I think was about an 11 ounce, maybe 12 ounce bottle. It was really wide. It sounds ridiculous, but I really had no idea. And I had no idea, but I drank the whole thing throughout the show. Leaving, I had no idea because my ears were just vibrating and all that. Well, we had to cross a divided highway. And so I guess luckily I tripped right in front of two state troopers, which we call, our word, policemen. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's the universe. State troopers. And that was it. They immediately said, "How are you getting home?" And amazingly enough, I said, "My sister is picking her up." And the cop said, "Prove it." So me, in my drunken state, called my sister on we had cell phones, called my sister and told her, drunk as I was, slurring to her, to get on and tell the cop that that she was coming to pick us up. And of course, my sister went nuts. My brother-in-law went nuts in the background. I'll never forget him screaming. They put me in protective custody. They took her separately, which is our version of, it's like being arrested without the charges. It's kind of great. That's awful to say, but I mean, they throw you in jail, but there's no charges. They just wait till you sober up and they let you go. Very luckily, as my mother said after, they didn't call DSS or anything. My sister happened to know her neighbor was there. She's the wife of a state cop. So she actually caught her in time to go pick my niece up. And that was it. Although it still took me almost a year to actually get sober. I got sick from diverticulitis. I thought it was a kidney stone. Diverticulitis is like a intestinal infection, almost where your intestine blows up in a way. But I thought it was a kidney stone. So I let it go so far that it did get to the point it kind of blew up. And it's almost like you have your body's sewerage seeps into your body and it puts pressure on your kidneys or in your bladder, which is why I thought it was a kidney stone, which I had before. And I almost needed surgery. I was in the worst pain of my life. And I was in the hospital for a couple days. And then I went on antibiotics. Wasn't related to drinking, but I said, I never want to put myself in that kind of self-inflicted pain again, of hangovers and all of that. So with a couple friends who already were working with me to try to get me, we'd gone to some AA meetings and I went to Smart Recovery. And a neighbor that told me he'd been sober on his own for 8 years. I said, "You can do it on your own?" He said, "Yeah." I had no idea. So I basically did it on my own for 3.5 years. And it was kind of great. I had a girlfriend for a lot of that. We went to hot yoga and it was great. We eventually broke up. I started dating again, but I didn't enjoy it. Actually, I got another girlfriend who was very fun, but I could always tell she wanted me to drink and I didn't really understand it. I'm like, why? I'm just as fun, but I wasn't. I was pretty boring and I'm clearly a fun guy. And I lived a pretty mundane existence. And eventually I said, I'd rather end up back in a gutter than continue to lead this existence. So when we broke up, which was mainly because I saw the movie Crazy Rich Asians and it was a love story. And I am a hopeless romantic at heart, even though I'm a serial casual dater. And I said, I want a girlfriend. So I went back to dating. But eventually, one night, went out with a date. I tell people different stories based on how long I thought they were going to, if it was going to go long term. This one definitely wasn't. Beautiful model type, but much younger. So I just said, I gave it up for the golf season. She said, it's October. Golf season's basically over. You can drink. And it wasn't that she pressured me. I made it through all the hard parts of meeting up with her as a first date, going through dinner, but she dragged me to an EDM club after, which I still didn't really even mind. But I did 2, I call them woo-woo shots. I don't know what they really were, but very basic shots. But I had the best buzz I had in years. And for the next week, I drank normally, went to a couple events, might have pre-drank 1 beer. Then I met back up with her on Halloween and pre-drank. We got in a fight. I was right back to the bad buzz. It all came roaring back as it does. I knew then I needed to give it back up, but it took me 6.5 years to get back to day one. And that was really all because my mother and sister, also on Halloween, that would have been probably like 3 years later. And it was 3 years ago, this Halloween. We're filming this just a few days out, a week after Halloween. My mother and sister showed up at my door, surprisingly, and basically gave me an intervention. I always been in sales, but I wanted to get out of sales because of drinking. And while I was job searching at a coffee shop drinking, I decided I wanted to go into some kind of food service, maybe work at I was actually working out of a superstore, grocery store. I said, I think it'd be fun to work here. I didn't even make it past the screening interview because I didn't have management experience. I wanted to like manage the seafood section, but this kid didn't even pump me out. I would have been the best employee they ever had. But instead, I bought the pizza shop down the street because they had such great pizza. Sounded like it would be fun. Everyone told me I was crazy. And a year into it, I said, everyone told me I was crazy to do this. And guess what? They were right, especially because it was 50 yards from a liquor store. I had a month before I closed on it. I said, I'll just quit drinking before then, but I didn't. And that was awful. So even though I didn't bring in liquor, anytime we got slammed, which we did, I bought it right before COVID. No matter what, I could run over and in literally 3 minutes be back and forth with a handle of vodka, which was my main thing. And it was awful. I'd be doing the dishes, even though the owner would be short staffed Fridays. At the end of every Friday night, I'd be bawling doing the dishes. With my employees all just cleaning up around me. They pretty much knew it was awful. And I promised my mother, I'd love to say this, that day they came, she tried to make me go to rehab, but I said, no, no, no. And I really did, but I vowed I'd never drink again. I joined a sobriety community, which was amazing, enlightening. And unfortunately, for the sake of time, I'll skip it, but I did it after 63 days. I had a crazy day at the pizza shop. My cook didn't show up. I did it all on my own. I ran the whole place. I normally ran the front. I ran the front and back over lunch, but to celebrate, I drank. Does that sound familiar? And that led to a series of slips until I, in the luckiest club, Laura McCowan, who wrote We Are the Luckiest, I'd been on and off slipping. And one day on her call, I talked to a buddy just before her 8 a.m. call, and he said, problem is you're never honest with these people. I said, I'm going to use Laura for some free coaching. I might buy a car. I might rejoin my golf club. He goes, just be honest. And I said, damn it. And I fessed up. I never lied about my day count, but I always just talked like I had it figured out. I never even declared a day count really on those calls. And I said, Laura, this is day 2. I vowed I'd never declare my day count to you unless I was going to make it stick. And that was almost 20 months ago. And yeah, I haven't drank since. So there we go.
Congratulations. It's a hell of a story. And it's so funny, isn't it? How we know at certain points in our life that actually this isn't great for us, but we keep going back to it thinking it's good in some way. We've been so conditioned to believe that it's the thing that we need in all sorts of situations. You know, you talk about grief and your grandmother and obviously drinking then, and then you talk about when you're in college trying to fit in. We used alcohol for these various things because we thought that was the only way we could deal with whatever was going on with us. And ultimately it's not about the drink. It's never about the drink. It's about what's the feeling we're trying to create or escape from with that drink. And so thank you for sharing so vulnerably. And gosh, it is incredible. I hope you're super proud with the 20 months. I think that's amazing. What's changed then? Because one of the things I did pick up on was the fact that you said when you stopped for those 3.5 years back in 2014, you weren't living the life that you wanted to live. You were bored. You weren't really, you were existing basically. So what's changed in the past 20 months? That's because the fact that you said that, I would never have thought that about you, having obviously met you. So what's changed and how is it different this time?
Yeah, that's great. You know, and I'm so glad you picked up on that because I buried the lead, which I'm going to say in a second, but it's so true. And I forgot to say, you know, after 3.5 years, when I tried to drink normally, I love to say to our people, the good news is we can drink normally. The bad news is not for long. And that's just it. So and there was a guy in a sobriety community I had told a year or so in, I said, I haven't laughed in years. I said, I don't have fun. I don't go out. I'm a hermit. And he said, you, Cappy, I can't believe it. And I said, yeah, I mean, it completely had stifled my personality. I mean, it just, like we said, it has the absolute opposite effect. There's a great quote where a guy talks about, and I love to say, the promises of alcohol are all lies. Promises of sobriety are all true. And there's a great quote from an unnamed AA guy, and it basically ends with, alcohol promised me heaven and it gave me hell, and just like socially, it promises you that you're going to be more social and gregarious and all that. But in the end, it has the opposite effect as it stops working for us. But what I really wanted to mention during that recap, and you picked up on, was that, I did do it on my own. You can do it on your own, but even if you do, you will not, at least I don't believe you'll achieve emotional sobriety. It wasn't till we do often say slips. You don't want to glorify them, but I say slip stands for some learning and progress. And I've learned so much from my slips. And if I hadn't quit drinking after that 3.5 years, which would now mean this would be I would have hit 11 years, right? I likely would have been still living that same existence. And you know why? Because I did not feel permission to enjoy life sober. And that's what doing it this time in community has given me, because I've learned how to live life sober and how to thrive sober. And when we get to my community, I can talk about how I did that. But basically, communities are practice for real life. And by doing that, that's how I got to rejoin society and get my life back and rediscover that strong 18-year-old kid that walked into that dorm room that day. Just saying that gets me a little misty. So yeah, it's and I just listened to your husband. I literally was getting ready and listened to your husband on your podcast when you hit, it was a year of your podcast anniversary. And he said, he mentioned his strong 23 or 24-year-old self. And the girl on the train, I love to reference, and I need to look up the exact line, but the husband, who was the evil husband, but said to her, you used to be, she was the one with the drinking problem. And he said, you used to be so strong. And that really hit home for me. And I was like, I want to rediscover that kid. And I have.
Have you started running again?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I actually never stopped. I actually I had testicular cancer long ago, 2009. That's the one to get. It's probably the most curable. Even Lance Armstrong's was super advanced, and he was all right. So luckily I just had one and done, as I say, just the surgery and then proactive scans. But I vowed after that I would raise money. So for Dana-Farber, probably universal, right? Dana-Farber Cancer, based in Boston, I ran the Boston Marathon for them for 4 years. And I was on the board for raising money. So I raised over $50,000. So I ran that 4 years in a row. Although we'd go out and run, the bar we would meet at on Thursday nights, we'd take the subway, the T, out to Boston College and run 12 miles back in. And what would I do? I lived across the street. I'd run home and shower and then do my pre-drinking and then meet everyone at the bar. I couldn't even meet up with the runners sober. Like, I couldn't even walk into a bar and just wait to have my first drink there. It was so crazy and so sad. So I did continue to run, but definitely it lapsed a lot. And particularly during COVID in the pizza shop, forget about it. My entire existence, it's 0.7 miles down the road, open 5 days a week. I would just go back and forth to the pizza shop and then just recuperate basically every day. So yeah, I had pretty much stopped then. So yeah. And, but yes, regained my love of running and of music as well, which is a great topic. I used to need talk radio to drown out the negative thoughts in my head. I could not listen to music because I was trapped with my own thoughts. So now I love my own thoughts. I'm the sugar plum fairies dancing in my head as we approach Christmas. So yeah, I love rediscovering that.
Yeah, it's I think it's a really tough one to think about, when you think about things you could have done differently, or you think back to your 18-year-old self, and you want to kick them, don't you, and go, why? Why did you? But as you rightly said, it is all about life's lessons. It's all about learning. It's one of the things I do is human design, and depending on your human design, there is something called a 6 line, and you might have that in your profile, and that is all about the different stages of life. So people who have a 6 line will go through the first 30 years where they're experimenting, they're learning all the lessons, they're doing all the things, and chaotic maybe, and then the next 20 years between 30 and 50, they sort of retreat a little bit, they start to take on these learnings, they start to look at the life, the world slightly differently, get a different perspective, and then 50 plus, they come out and they're just like able to share all this wisdom and learnings and all these life lessons. And actually that's a real blessing. And there are lots of other parts of human design that sort of have a similar thing, but I do believe we go through these lessons to share and to help others and to really use our wisdom to know better. And whatever you do, you can only do with what you know. So I always talk about, we talk about human design being a deconditioning tool, because we all conditioned as children up until the age of 7. And actually your parents only did the best they could with what they knew at the time. Maybe they would be very different 20 years on, or 30 years on, or 40 years on. And so I always think, give ourselves grace and just let us say, okay, well, this is what it was, what do I do going forward? And so what I'd love to hear is, once you stopped, what happened, and how has life changed for you since?
Yeah. So I got out, I walked away from my pizza shop. I stopped drinking about 5 minutes, 5 months before that, but it was not easy. I mean, it was absolutely had become my biggest trigger, just because we would, I mean, I hated it basically. I worked my whole life not to have to work nights and weekends. I started out as a busboy, then a waiter, noble professions, but they're very difficult, and night shifts are very unhealthy. And here I'm working nights and weekends, and I was miserable. I was very lucky during COVID. No one could have a life. But then as COVID went away, everyone was getting a life again. I wasn't. I was miserable. So it was definitely my biggest trigger. I basically white knuckled through those last 5 months. Some Friday nights I would pound NA beers, fool my mind. I was a dipper, which I know women some cringe. Chewing tobacco, as it's called, was a habit I picked up out of college. In first sales job, they just threw us in a bullpen, a big room with a bunch of guys, and everyone in there was already dipping. And I learned very quickly that was the way to go. It gave you that kind of immediate quote buzz. And so I would dip to get through it, and picture I'm greeting customers, but I would totally just pack it around my mouth as thinly as possible so no one would know. But yeah, I was dipping. I've always used Clonopin as needed for anxiety, like trying to get me not to drink if I was going to have a sales presentation or something, but it was never the same buzz. So it would rarely I would take it when I should have. But anyway, so I would take Clonopin. I even tried a little marijuana. Pot's now legal in Mass, so the pot vape, but I hated that buzz. So I knew it was only a matter of time if I continued. So I tried to sell it. There were issues with the landlord, and I basically just walked away. I took my own advice. I tell people, you have to eliminate all your triggers. The only trigger you can't eliminate is your pesky kids, even your pesky spouse. You technically can. You should try to work on your marriage, but I say if they won't do the work along with you, but seriously, anything that triggers you, almost you can do something about. And that was a bit, even your job. Ideally, if you can afford it, even if you can't, sobriety is priceless. So as long as you can pay the rent, and luckily I've made money in my sales career. So I walked away, and that's been about 13 months ago. And I've since then I focused on myself, doing the work. I attended so many sobriety calls. I mean, leaving the pizza shop, even though I was 5 months in, was almost like day one. And so I attended calls like crazy. I shared like crazy, which took me 3 months. I was once a learner, not a lurker, but a learner, but I never shared. I was afraid to share, which you might find hard to believe, but I love telling people that message. I once was as scared as anybody. Now I don't skip a beat, but so I shared like a maniac. Read a ton of books, did just self-care. I did so much of that for the first year. And then I just worked on a podcast. I knew I wanted to do a podcast. Being named Cappy, it named itself Cappy Hour. I'll have to say it anyway, just in case anyone missed it, but just like happy hour, is that universal? I mean, they don't actually allow happy hours in Massachusetts, drink specials, because it's dangerous. I kind of applaud them for it. People over drink when so, but my marketing guy said, you have to film short YouTubes in advance of the podcast to promote it. Well, 3 to 5 a week, basically 5 a week. I couldn't do it, Dupe. I'd be lucky if I did 3. I would go through an entire day and finally get around to filming at literally 10 o'clock, midnight. I couldn't do it. I basically discovered I had no executive function, which is the part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, which is we do all the brain damage to from drinking. I just couldn't do it. My mind would not allow me to. It was awful. And so I've since discovered I also have massive ADHD, or I just call it ADD. I don't really have the hyper part, despite my energy. And that is also a massive lack of executive function. But I discovered that's what it was. I kept waiting just for me to get far enough sober to get productive, and then realized it was never going to happen. And luckily, I signed up with this coach and this guy with a great program for ADD, and now I can almost whip off video. I'm still have a lot of work to do. I still struggle every day, but I eventually got to that point. So I started filming but even prior to that, I did start filming my podcast back in January. It's now November, really February, but I kept taking breaks, said I can't do this until I get productive. And I go back and forth, but now I finally joined that program about 8 weeks ago, and it's really starting to kick in. So I had all these back podcasts that I have since launched, and now I'm on a regular filming schedule, and I'm ready to launch my community as well. So the one thing I'm still not doing enough is getting out into the real world. But when I do, I go into a work bar, a shared office space, to work on my notes and all that. And I am thriving in real life. You know, I'm not traveling the world, which is an option, but I have found my calling. The first time I ever shared, I knew I was different from other people. And then the most recent community I joined, they let members host calls. And that's why I joined them. And the very first call I hosted, I knew I had a gift for that and a calling. And I've never been an individual contributor. I'll end with that and let you speak. In sales, if I learned something that worked, a cold call or a cold email, I shared it with the whole team. I was the only guy that did that. But I didn't want to be a manager. I knew that wasn't my calling, to be a sales manager. And now I found my calling in sobriety. I found my true self. You know, I listened to your podcast with Carolina where you read her results of her, what is it, human design? I knew I'd forget.
Human design, yeah, human design.
And I'm so much like her, but all those things she is, you know, driven and want to be an entrepreneur and all that stuff. I never would have known until I got sober. I never had a deep conversation in my life until I joined a sobriety community. You know, we truly are the luckiest. That's why Laura McCowan really is my idol. That book, I say it every day. You know, I don't have an official gratitude practice other than to every day say, we are the luckiest, because even the connections, you and I, we've never met. This is it. We've exchanged a few messages, but I feel like I've known you my entire life, just like I do with all my sober friends.
It's so much deeper, isn't it? You have this, you realize that you've been living in this sort of almost fog. I always say you live in like this mirror, and then all of a sudden it's like Technicolor, and you suddenly realize there are so many more possibilities and options and so many wonderful people around. And I think for a long time, you can be quite skeptical about people. You can be quite skeptical about whether people are actually genuinely wanting to help you without an agenda. And this community is just amazing. The alcohol-free community is one of a kind, and people are just really willing to share, to help, to give, to get people on podcasts, to do all of that stuff, because it's amazing. You do have these fantastic conversations, and I realized the same. I just can't do shallow talking anymore. It's just doesn't interest me at all. I need to have proper conversations.
Yeah. You know what I like to say I do? My family gatherings are pure small talk. And I say, I try to turn them all into sobriety meetings. I actually try to be the host and try to ask, bring up topics and have deeper conversations, but it's very difficult, but yeah, I love it. A great quick story. So when I got divorced, my rebound girlfriend, who we're still great friends with 20 years later, but we basically broke up. She's from the Pacific Northwest. There tend to be deeper talkers, like she tried to get me read The Power of Now. I didn't make it through 2 pages. And, I couldn't deep conversations. That's again, why we basically broke up. I even broke up with her. It's a big joke to this day who broke up with who, but it was definitely me. She was even going to move to Boston. And I said, no, I'm not enough for you. You continue to complain that I'm not deep enough. Well, bottom line, 20 years later, she's been dating a guy for 6 months, initially loved him. They stayed up all night talking. Well, they exhausted all their conversation. And she now complains to me that he's a shallow talker as we have deep conversations. Yeah, it's so great. And
How funny.
yeah, I go, Gina, tell him to go to therapy. He must have problems. That's how I learned how to do it. Therapy, coaching, and in community, doing the work, which I never would have done. There's a great quote from Veronica Valley, who I trust and she says, all humans are called to do this work. We are just, with our little alcohol problem, are forced to do the work. And that's a main reason we're the luckiest. I never would have done group therapy. That's what communities are. They're group therapy that I never would have done in my life. At least I always thought, luckily still my parents said, when my mother passes, especially, or someday I'm very close to her, I'm going to have to do some kind of therapy for that. But that's the only way I ever thought I would do it. And now I'm just not even going to need it because I've become so strong. I made a note to say that. Almost answering your question at the end about thriving is bring it on. I can handle anything. Death used to scare the hell out of me. I used to wake up in the middle of the night freaking out. Now it's like, bring it on. I mean, not anytime soon. You
still got a bit to do, Cappy.
Yeah. I used to say in the throes of drinking, I didn't want to die, but I was waiting to die. And now I want to live forever. So, definitely bring it on. And I'll say one more thing related to thriving, which we want to segue to, because that's what it's all about. As they say, alcohol is just, get rid of that. And then I like to say, you got 99 problems, but alcohol is no longer one. And now you get to work on your other 98. And that's almost fun. So it's great. My perfectionism, my people pleasing, my ADD, and yeah, it's great.
No, it's fantastic how much has changed in such a short space of time, really, and I know it's a longer timeline, but just in these 20 months or 13, 14 months where you've left your pizza shop and everything's changed. For someone who might be listening and wondering, okay, this all sounds amazing, love it. What does doing the work mean to you, Cappy?
Oh, great question. I have a list. As we talked about starting up my sobriety community, I said, I need one of those. I have to get an email list going. As you mentioned, friends help. My friend Megan of Sober Sisters, she's been like my free coach. I was afraid to even ask her for any help because I'm like, I'm a quasi competitor of yours. And she's given me so much help. And she's like, you need to get an email list going. And it might be, I'm going to send you my list of the work because no one really tells you what the work is. So I'll give you a preview, but it's therapy, it's coaching, it's sharing. Therapy's for the past, coaching's for the future, sharing's for the present. But then I say it's also really for the past and the future. So I can't recommend that enough. And then it's doing hard things sober is a huge one. Let's say you've got to include, your cardio is huge. For me, it was cold shower finishes, which I've been doing actually for about 10 years inadvertently, or not knowing as part of this process. But I say it's the number one mood enhancer and cravings overcomer. And I think overall sobriety trick. Because it's a guaranteed hard thing sober every day. Even after 10 years, I start with a regular warm shower, and then I turn my head, the water's coming on my head, and I reach behind my back and I turn it to cold, and I still dread it every time. And then I'm still euphoric after 30 seconds. And when I get out, and now I've even started doing ice baths and shivering, which is such a hard thing. And I get it down now to 50 degrees. And they say women shouldn't go below 55. I've heard from Mel Robbins, I guess. I say it like that because anytime I mention to a woman, they said, Mel Robbins said that we shouldn't go lower. So yeah, but anyway, so doing hard things sober every day is huge. And then meditation, gratitude practice. I had no idea. They say gratitude practice gives you a dopamine hit. So, and then I have a million other things, but even playlists, music, Quitlet, podcasts. I ultimately got over it, I say, by getting obsessed with sobriety, learning everything I can about it. And that's what's led to me now that I'm going to do it as a vocation, and that's what I'm now doing with ADD. I'm getting obsessed with how it works. And I have learned I have a gift for this, which I used to be shy to use the word gift, but luckily this awesome coach named Keola said it. She goes, I have a gift. It's in my family. My father's a coach. I never thought I had a gift for anything, but I can take anything I hear about sobriety or even now ADD and with my neurodivergent brain, make all these connections and even explain the neuroscience. I never thought I'd be able to understand that. I'm not scientific, but I can take anything I hear and scientifically and then translate it kind of for the common person and make it inspirational and all that. So that's why, I look forward to doing this for life.
Oh my goodness. Amazing. Keola was on the podcast as well a couple of years ago now. Yeah, she was speaking about nutrition. She's great as well. I know she's part of the Luckiest Club.
She's awesome. I'll give you a great quote from her. A woman once came on and said, yeah, my husband just told me this is a lack of willpower, and I guess he's right. And thank God it was Keola. And she basically said, F him. And that's not true. But she had a great quote. The willpower is to do the work. Willpower will not prevent you, especially willpower alone, from drinking. Willpower is to do the work that engages your prefrontal cortex, and then you can eventually get strong enough to have some willpower. But I love that quote. And it's true. You have to do the work. And the work, that's what the work does. It strengthens your prefrontal cortex to allow you to fight off your midbrain, which is where the cravings come from. And it's a survival mechanism when that happens. As a scientist says, it's like someone offers you water after 5 days in the desert. They tell you you're going to lose your whole life if you drink it. You're going to drink it. Anybody would say yes to that. So that's what you're up against until you do the work, which ultimately is also, it's spiritual growth and personal development is really what it is, which
it's interesting. I've got a list in my book of the work, what I call the work, and they're all on my list. And the cold water showers was something I just thought was brilliant, and I loved. I did a lot of Wim Hof early days when I stopped drinking. Probably about a year after I stopped drinking, I discovered Wim Hof did one of his sessions that he did where he went through the horsepower pose and then the breathing, cold water showers, and his whole philosophy, which was fascinating. So love it. And you've obviously, I love the fact you say it's a calling, and I think many of us, we stop drinking and we do want to help others. We want to show people the light. We suddenly realize we have this gift. You've probably been doing it for forever anyway. You've been coaching and talking to people and doing that without realizing, but to have a calling and to give yourself permission to say you have a gift, again, we fear people's reaction to that, and they're maybe rejecting us or thinking we feel that we think too highly of ourselves or whatever. But it's a gift. It's a calling and a gift for people. But fear stops us from allowing us to really step into that. So with your calling, I know you're doing something that's going to launch that's quite exciting. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Sure, I would love to. And a couple quick notes. Another part of the work I explain is you have to replace the artificial dopamine hits with natural ones. And especially early on, first 6 months, you have to triple up on the natural ones to match the artificial ones. So a cold shower finish at 57 degrees, which most showers, at least in the winter, can get to. You can take a cup of water and put your thermometer in it. A buddy had to remind me to do that. I was like, how do you know temperature of your shower? But anyway, it'll give you a 250% dopamine kick that will last up to 3 hours. 3 hours. I mean, that's amazing. And that's just if you just do 1 minute. And I do, I start off at 30 seconds and a minute. I now do minimum 3 minute. I do a full cold shower dance in there. I have the greatest time. I play music. That's key to this. I have my Alexa in there. I crank it up. And one other thing I want to say is you have to get outside your comfort zone. Carolina, who's programmer in just last night, said, people don't want to be in their comfort zone. They want to be out living a fulfilling life. And I said, well, actually, and I didn't say it this way, but I politely said, I said, well, Carolina, I feel like most people love being in their comfort zone, but they also want the fulfilling life. You can't have both. So you have to, as Jay Chase said, if you know him, he talked about you have to go outside your comfort zone, but stay inside your strength zone. So that's so key. So you have to be very careful, but it progresses and your comfort zone widens and your strength zone widens in sobriety. And I was glad Laura McCowan agreed with me. Early sobriety, she defined as 1 to 2 years. It's not 3, 6, 12 months. It's much longer than that. So anyway, so one thing I have is my YouTube page is under Sober Cappy. I've up to over 100 videos on there now talking about cold immersion and overcoming people-pleasing, perfectionism, all kinds of leveling up stuff, which is really what I'm expanding much more into. And then the podcast Cappy Hour just launched, as I said. And then I'm launching, hopefully live next Wednesday is my goal and it's going to be called LEPT. LEPT. It's an acronym that just happened to work out to spell the word leapt, which to me means you're leaping. You will be leaping into your new life. I'd almost like to call it leap, but it's called leapt because I so fortunately came across a meme that my buddy Ryan shared that said, learn, experiment, perform, thrive.
Amazing.
And have you ever heard that, seen that wording before?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Unbelievable. And I realized that's exactly what I did in my sobriety community. Initially, like I said, I learned, I hate the word lurker. I hate when people come on and they share and they say, oh, I've been a long time lurker. No, you were a learner. So I was a long learner by force. Very luckily, I'm glad now I was reluctant to share for those first 3 months. So I just listened, which, by the way, tremendously has improved my listening skills, this process. So I was a learner, and then I started to experiment in terms of sharing and even getting more creative. I was so lucky this woman named Louise she really inspired me. She would dance on her calls. She would be very open in her shares. Most hosts just gave a topic, but they didn't talk about themselves. So I experimented with giving deeper and getting more and more vulnerable. I cried on many, many calls. Perform, also inspired by Louise, but would get me that.
Louise from the UK.
Yes, I was going to say.
As well. I know Louise. Yeah. We were in a group together. Yeah, I know.
Yes. I can't remember her last name. She is awesome. She's a host on the Luckiest Club, and she was a big part of my sobriety because she just puts herself out there on every share. I mean, it's amazing. And yeah, she dances it up. She plays music at that start of every meeting, and yeah, dances it up. And that's what I would do. At first, I couldn't even dance on camera. I would watch everybody else. They'd have dance parties now and then, which I would be having on my community, as well as open mic nights. We're actually going to do concerts, which I explain another time. But she, yeah, I would be off camera, maybe till the very end of an hour-long call, and then I would go on for the last song when there'd be over 25 people or 50. So I know I wasn't even on the first screen of cameras. And then I would eventually start taking a cold shower mid thing to get me the dopamine to go on. But eventually I would dance the whole hour thanks to her. So, and then I would start even singing. I would sing on calls, like Hot to Go. I would sing HOTT, hot to go. You can take me hot to. And I have a horrible singing voice, and I would still sing on there. And when I hit my 1 year, I shared in her call the song "I'm Still Standing," and I sang it in with no inhibition. So again, learn, experiment, perform, thrive, and I am now thriving. Still a lot from my own home, but I do thrive every time I go out into the real world as well. I'm no longer afraid of people, of almost anything. I'm virtually fearless. Laura says you can never be truly fearless, and I've learned she's right, but I'm pretty close to being fearless in sobriety.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I'm doing a workshop on fears in a couple of hours, and so if you're listening to the recording, you can get the recording of it, or listening to this later, you can get the recording of it. But it's all about the 20 fears that we have, the mental, emotional, and survival fears, and then we'll be doing an EFT, emotional freedom technique, to release some of those fears. But you're right, they're always sort of in the background, but it's how you deal with them that you can move forward. So yeah.
Yes, and I heard you talking about fears on your podcast with Lindsay. You mentioned something about 9 fears, and I immediately Googled. I Googled everything I hear, and so yeah, I look forward to that. And just to finish, so on my community, it's going to be a recovery community. I've changed from sobriety because it's recovery. We're going to be leveling up. This is going to be, communities are great, but they're more like level 1 support. Just people give their 3-minute shares. You're not supposed to give advice and all that, but I will be interjecting a little bit, as well as having kind of level 2 calls, I'll call them, with more interactive sharing, where I interact with the people, and then doing challenges, getting people out of their comfort zone. My favorite quote is, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. So I really want to, it's going to be really a true leveling up community. And I'm probably going to add ADD, ADHD calls and on there as well, because practically every alcoholic I've ever talked to says they have ADD as well, which makes sense because we've completely done brain damage, as I said, to that area where executive function lies. So I want to make it a true recovery community. So hopefully that will be launched by the time this podcast comes out. So, but it's going to be called LEPT. It's hosted by Mighty Network. So it's not the URL, just for the record. So it's iLept. It had to be 5 letters. It couldn't be 4. So ILEPT, iLept.mn.co, which is mightynetworks.co. So I didn't pay for the custom one yet. So I'm sure we'll put that in the show notes, but yeah, that's it.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm so excited for you, Cappy. And one thing you did say, you mentioned, and it's a great segue, because I want people to know how to get in touch with you, was your sober Instagram. So tell me a bit about that.
Oh yeah. So the funny story there is that I changed my personal one. My personal one is Cappy 90210, which is just, there was a show called Beverly Hills 90210.
Yeah,
so
I remember it. Watched it.
That's very good. But it wasn't like I did love the show. I loved Melrose Place even better. Did you watch that?
I can't remember Melrose Place, but I definitely watched Beverly Hills 90210. Yeah.
So I just randomly, they didn't have Cappy available. So anyway, so I changed. Now it's a couple years ago, I wanted to start a sobriety one. I wanted to just convert my personal one. So I changed it to Sober Cappy while I was drinking. Yeah. Thought I'd be
wonderful.
Thought I would manifest. So yeah, the next
day,
the next day I changed that back. And then after I finally declared my final day 2 to Laura, I did eventually start a sober Cappy account. Oh, and by the way, I should add, I declared that to Laura. I then every day declared my day count. I called it my acceptance speech. I said, yep, this is my day 3 acceptance speech. And I love that. And I'm going to encourage my people to use that term as well. No one ever stole it from me, and I wanted people to. So everyone, you should. You're accepting that you did it, but you're accepting sobriety. So yes, Sober Cappy is on Instagram, and I'm starting up a Sober Cappy Facebook, and yeah, what else? Cappy Hour is the podcast as well. And the only other note I wanted you to remind me of, Laura had a program called The Sober Life where you had to have a year of sobriety. And I'd had 3.5 years. I was struggling at the time, but I'd had 3.5 years in the past, 3.5 in the past. So I said, I can fake it, make it, fake it till you make it. The program cost about $2,000. I was listening to a call that night under the influence. A guy had signed up for it. I signed up for it that night while I was drinking, and then woke up the next day and said, oh my God, what am I doing? And I had to email them to get a refund and get out of that program. So that didn't quite work, but anyway, yes, Sober Cappy is my persona, but I don't know. I might have to recover it to like recovery or change it. Recovery Cappy, level up Cappy. Cause as you found with your rebranding, it's so much more than just getting sober.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to see what comes next, Cappy. Thank you so much for being a guest. And so people can find you at Sober Cappy and your website as well for your community, which we will put below. Is there any actually, no, I think you've gone through it so well. I feel like I don't need to ask the question, but what does thriving mean to you? Maybe in like 3 or 4 words.
Yes, I thought you were going to skip it because I've talked so much. Thriving means to me winning life again.
Wow, love it. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And any final words of wisdom that you want to share?
Well, I'm looking at a quote related to that question that says, don't fear your life will end, fear it will never begin. And it's so true. When you're drinking, you're alive, but you are not living. And now not only are we living, but we are truly thriving. So that's it. That's it. Don't delay.
I love that.
Don't delay. Quit today.
Don't delay. Quit today. Love it. Love it. Brilliant. Well, thank you. And I might use that quote in my workshop. So thanks for sharing that.
If you mean that one, I just came up with it.
And don't fear, your life will end. That's the one.
Okay.
Your life will end. Yeah, I think
that really is a great one too. All right.
Yeah. And I love the don't delay, quit today. Is that just come up?
It just hit me, and I love when I think I've invented stuff, and then I go and Google it, and it's been around. Like Funbriety, which I almost named my community. That's out there though, not that often. So, but yes. And by the way, that is what we'll be having in my community is fun. So we're going to learn, but we're also going to learn to enjoy life sober. So it is a fun life. Chris Marshall, if you know him, runs Sands Bar. I'll end with this. He said, no matter how much fun you think in sobriety, take it and times it by 1,000. We're redefining our definition perhaps of fun, but it is a fun existence.
Yeah.
24/7.
Absolutely. Yep. Love it. Well, thank you so much for being an amazing guest. It's been so wonderful to have you on. Everyone should go and follow you and obviously look at your community and join the community. And I wish you all the best. And, I can't wait to keep seeing what you're doing over the coming year or two, because I'm sure it's going to evolve, it's going to change, and you're going to do amazing things. So thanks so much.
You're welcome, and thank you. And I look forward to having you on mine. So all of you Dupe fans, check her out. Look her up on hopefully Cappy Hour. All right, thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much for listening to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe so you get alerted every time I drop a new episode. I'd love it if you could rate, review, and share this episode. Feel free to tag me on Instagram at Thrive Alcohol Free and follow me for daily tips. If you would like to work with me, I offer one-to-one coaching sessions, and if you're not yet ready for coaching, I also have a self-paced online course, which is a companion to my book, A Cocktail of Clarity. I will see you in the next episode. Have a wonderful week. Take care.